Riverdale, a small town nestled quietly in the Oregon mountains, looked from afar like a scene from a fairy tale: steep-roofed houses, lush green lawns, and tree-lined streets on both sides. But to the longtime residents who lived there, they knew that behind the peaceful facade and the courteous faces of the local police hid a cold, brutal, and unspoken truth. Two names that everyone avoided speaking aloud: Officer Bradley Cooper and Officer Sean Turner. Bradley and Sean weren't your average police officers. They didn't need flashing lights to make someone pull over. All it took was a look, a slow glare through the windshield, enough to send a driver's heartbeat into panic. They didn't need reasons to question people, just professional intuition. And once they targeted someone, the rest was just a matter of time. This duo were like ghosts of the law, unregulated, unquestioned, and always protected by the very system they were supposed to uphold. Bradley had a voice that sent chills down your spine the moment he spoke, deep, clear, never rushed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a clean-cut hairstyle and unblinking eyes that drilled into you like steel. For him, every traffic stop was a performance of power, and the driver, often a young man of color or an immigrant, was just another target in a game where he always knew the ending. Sean was different, quieter, but cunning and venomous. His half-smile never reached his eyes, and every word he spoke was as soft as it was sharp. He wrote the reports, justified every excessive act, and convinced the court that the victim had acted suspiciously before being restrained. No one dared to challenge them. Those who tried paid the price, like Mrs. Nora, a widow living in the south side of Riverdale, who filed a complaint after her son was shoved to the ground by the two officers while walking home after a night shift. Less than a week later, her house was raided under suspicion of drug possession. Nothing was found, of course, but the message was clear. Everyone understood it. Don't go against Cooper and Turner. They didn't beat people in broad daylight. They dragged them into blind spots where cameras were conveniently broken or malfunctioning. They didn't need to shout. A few whispered threats were enough to make people tremble and sign reports out of fear of being detained. Young men of color had a nickname for them: the Death Pair, not because they killed, but because they crushed hope, dignity, and equality. Once a student named Malik, 21 years old, was pulled over while driving home with a pile of textbooks after a night class. When he asked why, Bradley sneered, "People around here don't recognize your face." 3 minutes later, Malik was face down on his car hood, arms twisted behind his back, and taken to the station. The charge: resisting a public officer. When his lawyer requested the officer's body cam footage, the data had mysteriously failed to upload to the server. People became afraid of walking at night, especially if their skin wasn't white enough or their clothes not clean-cut enough. Conversations in barbershops, grocery stores, and family diners grew quieter. Everyone knew, but no one did anything, because the system always stood with Cooper and Turner. Complaints were shelved and disappeared. Investigative articles were pulled by editors due to lack of verification. Whispers turned into sarnies. Riverdale remained beautiful, clean, and quiet if you closed your eyes to the truth. What was terrifying wasn't the sound of gunfire, it was that it was never even needed. Just Bradley's stare as you walked out of a grocery store. Just Sean's offhand comment: "This area gets dangerous after dark. You should head home." They manipulated the atmosphere, controlled the silence, and they existed like a tumor buried deep in the veins of Riverdale. Something everyone ignored because cutting it out might bleed too much. Even rookie officers learned the unspoken rules quickly. If you wanted to stay out of the trouble, don't ask questions. If you wanted a promotion, learn how to cooperate with your superiors. One tried to speak up, a Latino officer named Alvarez, and was quietly reassigned to desk duty, eventually resigning without a word. No statements, no scandal, just an internal transfer. Like everything in Riverdale, truth was always buried under smiles and bureaucracy. Bradley once told a man he arrested with pride in his voice, "The law, I am the law." And Sean just stood behind him, arms crossed, smiling faintly. They weren't afraid of anyone anymore. They didn't recognize boundaries. Every traffic stop, every ID check, every veiled threat wasn't just a tool. It was their addiction, and they had no intention of quitting. Riverdale was rotting from the inside, day by day, hour by hour, under the silent complicity of justice. But as with every story that seems endless, fate chose to intervene by sending someone they couldn't break. A man whose past was locked behind redacted files, a man they assumed was just some stranger walking his dog. They didn't know the dog's name was Max, and they had no idea that his owner, Derek Cole, was the last nightmare many enemies of the United States ever saw. They didn't know, but they would, at a cost higher than they could ever imagine. The crimson sunset spread over the town of Riverdale, casting amber and gold across rooftops, windows, and lives that seemed peaceful on the surface. But for Derek Cole, a man recently returned from nameless battlefields, that kind of golden light only heightened his awareness. Seasoned soldiers never trusted quiet evenings. They were often the prelude to something about to explode. He walked steadily along the stone sidewalk, leash in hand with Max, his thick-coated, intelligent, and disciplined shepherd, moving calmly beside him. It had been 2 months since he'd last been home. Missions in the Middle East had weighed down his shoulders, deepened the silence in his eyes, and shortened his sleep. Only Max remained unchanged, always in step, always quietly guarding. That afternoon, like so many others, Derek strolled through a newly built neighborhood by the lake. The residents here were mostly white, conservative, middle class, fond of quiet and averse to anything unfamiliar. Derek knew that. He didn't wear his military gear. No dark shades, just a man in a track jacket and dark khakis walking his dog. But none of that mattered, because the moment a white-gray patrol car turned the corner, he knew. The vehicle rolled to a slow halt like a predator sizing up its prey. Derek didn't look back. He had long since learned that recklessness often begins with eye contact, but Max knew. He paused for a heartbeat, ears perked, eyes fixed through the tinted window. The car door opened. A familiar voice, smooth and mocking, broke the silence. "Good afternoon, sir. We received a report about a man and his dog behaving suspiciously in this neighborhood." Sean Turner, still with that half smile, but still disguising threats behind politeness. Derek turned to hands still loosely holding Max's leash. He responded in a low, steady voice. "I live here. Walk my dog every evening. Nothing suspicious about that." Bradley Cooper stepped out from the driver's seat, arms resting on his belt. Face unreadable. "Can I see some ID?" Derek met his gaze. His eyes weren't those of an ordinary man. They were sharp, surgical, Susin, kind of stare that had made many armed men rethink their next move. Still his tone remained calm. "I'll show it, but I'd like to know the reason before you demand it." The air thickened as if every street lamp, every paving stone was holding its breath for something inevitable. "This is a routine check," Bradley replied, voice lower, more tense. "Let me see your ID now." Derek nodded slightly and slowly reached into his inner pocket for his wallet. Max shifted muscles, tensing, body angled for defense. His breathing deepened. Derek recognized the signs. Max was on alert. He handed over his ID, keeping steady eye contact with Bradley. But Bradley didn't look at the card. He looked at Derek like he was searching for an excuse. Sean stepped forward, voice dropping. "Folks around here don't recognize you. Just moved in recently." "I live at 84C. The lease is in my name. Is that a problem?" Derek replied, light but unwavering. Bradley sneered, "I think we need to make sure you're not carrying anything dangerous. Your dog looks aggressive." Max let out a low growl, barely audible, but enough to make Sean take a half step back. His eyes flickered with alarm before he masked it with indignation. "Control your dog. Now," he snapped. Derek's voice cut sharp and clear. "Max is under control. He hasn't attacked anyone. Don't escalate this." Bradley's hand went to his gun. That moment the wind died, the world went silent, and only the thudding of hearts remained. Max growled again, louder this time. He didn't charge. He stood still, but his eyes locked in defiance. challenged them like a trained soldier facing down a SWAT unit, and then the gunshot. Max jerked. Blood sprayed across the pristine sidewalk. Derek screamed, eyes wide with disbelief. He lunged forward but was tackled to the ground. Sean slammed a knee into his back while Bradley fired the taser. Pain tore through him, but it was nothing compared to the moment he saw Max convulsing, then lying still. "Stop resisting," Sean yelled. "Hands behind your back." Derek collapsed, gasping for breath, his chest torn open, not by tasers but by grief. In his mind, there was only one image: Max on the pavement, eyes wide open, still waiting for a command that would never come. They didn't let him say goodbye. They didn't let him hold him in one last time. Everything ended in a suffocating silence, but something had awakened in Derek Cole, something soldiers on the battlefield once gave a different name: disciplined wrath. They thought they had put a troublemaker in his place, but they had no idea. They had just summoned death itself with the arrogance of kings. And for Derek, when Max, the only being who had never betrayed him, was taken, the only thing left was vengeance. The sound of ambulance sirens faded into the distance as Derek Cole sat motionless in the cold interrogation room of the Riverdale Police Department. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. Bruises spread across his arms, and the aftershocks of the taser still pulsed in his muscles, but he didn't feel pain. Nothing could hurt more than the image of Max collapsing on the cold pavement, blood pouring from the gunshot wound at his neck. Eyes still fixed on Derek as if waiting for one final command, a command that would never come. The room was unnaturally quiet, broken only by the ticking clock, each second pounding like a drumbeat against his chest. Outside night had fallen completely. Riverdale sank into its usual artificial peace, as if no one had heard the gunshot that afternoon, as if no one had seen the blood of an innocent life staining a corner of their perfect little town. Derek stared into the one-way mirror, fully aware someone stood behind it, watching, judging, preparing to twist the narrative and paint him as the aggressor. The door opened. A brunette woman in a crisp suit entered, her eyes cold and sharp as a blade. She dropped a file onto the table without looking at him. "You are under arrest for disobeying a lawful police order, and your dog was shot because it posed a threat to officer safety," she said, her voice as sterile as a legal textbook. Derek didn't respond. His gaze was blank, hands resting still on his knees. But inside, something was breaking. Not just from grief, but from a righteous fury tempered by years of battlefield discipline. He was released hours later. Derek walked out of the police station without saying a word. He didn't go home. He went to the veterinary hospital. They didn't let him see Max. "He was dead before we could do anything," a nurse said, unable to meet his eyes. Derek simply nodded. No tears, no shouting, but his hands clenched so hard that his palms bled. He brought Max home, dug the grave himself, buried him in the backyard beneath the tall pines he had planted. His first year in Riverdale. No ceremony, no candles, no mourners. Just one man kneeling over a cold patch of earth, laying down an old leash beside an unmarked stone. That night, Derek sat in the dark lights off the glow from his laptop illuminated his face, sharp, expressionless, carved from stone. He pulled up every file, every patrol route, every shift rotation from the Riverdale PD, especially those of Cooper and Turner. Every habit-favorite bar's post-shift routines, usual patrol zones, informal relationships. He had tracked terrorists across borders. These two corrupt officers were nothing. Each detail lit up in his mind like a target locked in the scope. No emotion, no hesitation, only strategy and execution. 2 nights later, Cooper left a seedy bar on the outskirts of town, one he frequented after every late shift. As he stepped out the back door, fumbling for his keys, a shadow lunged from the side. One hand clamped over his mouth. The other struck the base of his skull. Cooper collapsed without a sound. When he woke, he was face down on cold concrete, wrists zip-tied behind his back. Derek knelt beside him and whispered into his ear, "Remember Max, the dog you killed?" Cooper writhed, tried to scream, but only a strangled wheeze came out. Derek didn't hit him, didn't torture him. He just stared into his eyes and let him see the fire in a man who had lost all faith in justice. "I'm not going to kill you," Derek said, "because you need to live to know what's coming next." Then he cut the ties, left Cooper crawling across the parking lot, bloody weaponless, badgeless, and powerless. 3 days later, it was Turner's turn. He was dragged into an alley behind the station after a night shift. Derek didn't hit him. Not at first. He forced him to watch a video clip, Max getting shot, Turner pulling the trigger, Turner laughing as Max collapsed. Then Derek struck, not to cause damage, but to convey the pain. Every punch carried a memory of Max lunging to protect. Every kick was a replay of those wide, confused eyes asking why Turner lay in a filthy puddle, nose-broken lips, bleeding, and Derek crouched. "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of you learning what helplessness feels like." Then he vanished into the night, leaving behind nothing but a fear that would never stop eating at them. The news said nothing. Internal affairs remained silent, but the community knew. Whispers in coffee shops, glances exchanged in school hallways. Everyone told the same story. Someone was finally standing up to the darkness that ruled Riverdale. Derek didn't make public appearances. He didn't speak out, but he started releasing pieces of truth, videos, redacted reports, secret recordings to investigative journalists. Every document was a puzzle piece the system had tried to bury. And when the leaks spread, when the public took notice, the authorities could no longer stay silent. The Riverdale Police Department announced an internal investigation. But it was too late. They had lost control of the narrative. And in the shadows, Derek Cole watched. There was nothing left that could bring Max back. But Derek had made a promise. If justice would not come on its own, then he would bring it with him. RARSAM. The glow of the laptop screen cast a pale light on Derek Cole's weathered face in the unnerving silence of his living room. The house he once called home had now become the command center of a covert war. On the wall hung a web of connections, case files, printed photos of Bradley Cooper and Sean Turner, scrawled annotations in red ink. Every line exposed a buried truth. Every photo a stain. The system had tried to hide. Derek didn't strike again. No more ambushes. He didn't need to. Because he understood now the one thing that terrified men like them more than fists was the truth. He had been trained to kill in silence, to infiltrate undetected, to crush his enemies before they even knew he was there. But this time the battlefield wasn't a base in Syria or a camp in Afghanistan. It was the records room of the Riverdale Police Department, and he needed a new kind of weapon, evidence and public opinion. He started collecting it. Short audio clips of Cooper and Turner, intercepted via a radio scanner Derek had set up in his attic. A blurry video from a neighbor's security camera capturing the final seconds of the incident with Max, not crystal clear, but enough to show Derek hadn't made the first move. Then he breached the town's internal data system. Not to sabotage, but to download dozens of complaint files from residents who had been harassed, stopped, or assaulted by Cooper and Turner. Most of the reports had been dismissed for lack of evidence or unconfirmed misconduct, but when connected, they became an irrefutable indictment. Derek knew action alone wasn't enough. If he wanted to take them down, he had to drag the entire system into the light. And to do that, he needed a voice the public would trust. Someone who could make the nation listen. That someone was Jasmine Rowe, an investigative journalist known for exposing police violence in California. Derek contacted her through an anonymous account, sending a video file with a message. "This happened in Riverdale, and it's bigger than you think." Within 24 hours, Jasmine flew to Oregon. They met in an unnamed coffee shop where the lighting was so dim you couldn't clearly see the person sitting across from you. She listened, didn't interrupt. And when Derek handed over the file, her expression changed from doubt to shock, from shock to purpose. "Sorry, sir, Mr. Tretas. If I run this," she said, "you won't be able to stay hidden." Derek looked at her, his voice calm. "I'm not hiding anymore. I need them punished." 2 days later, the first article went live. Headline, "Max is dead, what about justice?" A blurred photo of Max's body on the pavement still conveyed enough to make the internet erupt. Below it, audio of Cooper laughing after the shot was fired, screenshots of buried complaints, testimonies from 3 anonymous witnesses stating clearly the dog didn't attack anyone. Riverdale couldn't stay quiet anymore. The city council held an emergency session. Crowds filled the square with signs, candles, and something the town hadn't seen in a long time. Hope reporters from CNN, CBS, even Reuters descended. For the first time, Derek saw those two faces. Cooper and Turner stripped of their arrogance. They were suspended. But Derek knew this was only the beginning. The system would always try to protect itself unless it was backed into a corner. And Derek, he had no intention of backing down. At a press conference in City Hall, Jasmine Rowe released a second video hallway security footage of Cooper and Turner barging into Derek's home without knocking, without a warrant demanding paperwork. A reporter raised his mic. "Mr. Cole, do you feel vindicated?" Derek stood at the podium, light reflecting off his determined face. He didn't smile, didn't wave. "I don't need vindication. I need justice, not just for me, but for everyone they've trampled." The crowd fell silent, but in that silence was a rising wave. Weeks later, a petition with over 100,000 signatures was sent to the state court, demanding criminal prosecution of the two officers. The public pressure forced the district attorneys to act. Derek officially filed suit and took the stand as the lead witness. When he walked into the courtroom, he wore no uniform, no badge. He was just a man who had lost too much, now seeking to reclaim everything through the system that once promised it to him: truth, evidence, and a verdict. On the stand, he recounted every second of that fateful afternoon, how Max growled but never attacked, how Derek raised his hands but was tasered anyway, how Cooper smiled after pulling the trigger. "I've fought in places where the law didn't exist," Derek said, his voice like Rolling Stone. "I never thought I'd have to fight for the most basic things when I came home to walk without being killed, to own a dog without watching him die in front of me." The jury didn't move, no blinking, no shifting, and Cooper, the man who once laughed like nothing could touch him, now bowed his head, fists clenched, eyes fixed on the floor. That afternoon, Derek walked out of the courtroom to a round of applause, not thunderous, not wild, but enough to tell him this fight was no longer his. Alone, courtroom 3 of the Riverdale County Courthouse was packed to capacity that morning. The air was so thick with tension that every breath seemed to echo alongside the soft rustling of papers and the endless clicking of camera shutters from the press. There wasn't a single empty seat in the public gallery. Those who couldn't get in stood outside in the square, eyes fixed on the large screen, broadcasting the trial live. Everyone knew today's verdict wasn't just about two officers, Cooper and Turner. It was a declaration to an entire system, once thought untouchable. Derek Cole sat upright at the witness stand, his fingers interlaced on the cold wood surface. His outfit was simple: white shirt, dark slacks, no badge, no rank. But the way he sat, the way he looked straight at the judge and jury, radiated a kind of discipline and strength no one in the room could ignore. Across from him, Bradley Cooper and Sean Turner, no longer in uniform form, sat beside their attorney, a salt-and-pepper-haired man in an expensive suit, wearing a smile that had long since crumbled under the weight of reality. The public already knew the truth. The evidence was overwhelming. They hadn't come to win, only to reduce the blow. But their eyes still burned with the same bitter hostility toward Derek, as if he had betrayed an unspoken code everyone else had learned to live under. The prosecutor stood. Her voice was sharp, each word striking like nails into the wood. "We charge the defendants with unlawful use of force, violation of personal liberties, illegal entry, falsification of reports, and above all, the killing of a defenseless animal, a dog named Max, who was doing what any loyal creature would do: protect his owner." She turned toward Derek. "Mr. Cole, can you recount that final moment?" Derek closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again, his gaze deep as if seeing beyond the courtroom through time itself. "I remember everything. Every step Max took, every glance he gave me, as if asking, 'What's going on?' I remember handing them my ID. I remember how they looked at me, not like a citizen, but a threat, simply because I didn't look like the people who lived there. I remember the gunshot, and I remember Max's eyes right before he fell. The courtroom fell silent. Someone bowed their head. Someone wiped a tear. I've been in combat, Derek continued. I've watched brothers die in front of me, but no one ever looked at me the way Max did in that moment, with eyes that asked why. Why was he being killed? Why would someone do that when he hadn't attacked, hadn't resisted? The prosecutor nodded. The jury took notes from the gallery. Jasmine Rowe gripped her notepad, eyes fixed on Derek's face. She knew this moment would play over and over again on every evening news program tonight. Then the defense attorney stood. He took a deep breath. Mr. Cole, you are a former military operative involved in numerous classified missions. Is it possible that your demeanor that day, your stare, your tone, your refusal to comply made the officers feel threatened? Derek didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make sudden movements. I spoke clearly, complied, and handed over my documents. If my eyes scared them, that's their problem, not mine. A few jurors nodded. The attorney retreated, masking his unease. Finally, the judge turned to the defendants. Bradley Cooper, Sean Turner, do you have anything to say before the jury delivers the verdict? Cooper stood. No apology, no remorse. We followed procedure. Every action we took was for public safety, and if I had to do it again, I would. Gasps erupted in the room. Some people shouted. An elderly woman stood and pointed. You're a murderer. The judge slammed his gavel, calling for order. Turner lowered his head, said nothing. His hands trembled. 12 jurors left for deliberation. 45 minutes later, they returned. The room held its breath. We find the defendants, Cooper and Turner, guilty on all counts. A wave of applause swelled, then roared into cheers. Outside crowds banged, pots blew whistles, and raised photos of Max with the words, "Justice for Max and for all of us." The judge handed down the sentence, 18 years without parole for Cooper, 14 years for Turner. No early release badge revoked, pension stripped, a lifetime ban from public service. Derek rose, no smile, no tears. He walked slowly through the courthouse hallway past the two men who once thought themselves untouchable, now cuffed and dragged away like any other criminals. He paused beside them, didn't even look them in the eyes, and simply said, Max says hello. Then he turned and stepped into the midday sun, where an entire community waited, applauding the man who gave justice a face. Late afternoon. Thick silver clouds hung low over the skies of Riverdale, reluctant to leave the town that had just witnessed a historic reckoning. The sun slowly descended behind the distant mountains, its golden light bleeding into streaks of crimson across the gray sky. Derek Cole stood motionless in the backyard of his old house. The wind whispered through the pine trees and needles drifted gently onto a small patch of grass, there beneath a modest gravestone carved with only two lines. Max, loyal to the very end. He brought nothing with him except an old rusted leash, the only thing left from Max's short but blazing life. Derek knelt, resting his hand on the cold stone. A deep breath escaped his chest as if he was trying to smother the ember of rage that had burned inside him for months. It's over, buddy, Derek murmured, his voice rough. They've lost their freedom. They've lost their voice. They lost everything, just like I lost you. The wind grew stronger. The trees swayed. Derek closed his eyes, letting the breeze brush over his sun-worn face. He could almost hear Max's bark echoing from the past, paws tapping on the sidewalk, his steady breathing as he ran beside him every morning. Memories surged back like a storm. Max curled beneath the bed after Derek returned from Syria, leaping into his arms after long missions, those ever-watchful eyes always waiting for the next command and the final time. Those same eyes wide open in a pool of blood, still searching for him, still waiting before fading into forever. Derek trembled. His fingers clenched the leash so tightly his nails dug into his skin, not out of anger, but emptiness. When the trial ended, when the cameras left Riverdale, when the applause faded into memory, one truth remained unchanged. Max was gone, He didn't cry. Men like him who had seen brothers fall in war didn't cry easily. But pain was different. It didn't erupt. It ate away quietly, turning sleep into a haunted haze. I know you didn't want revenge, Derek said, eyes fixed on the stone. You just wanted peace, evening walks, a full bowl of food, and your head resting on my leg like always. But they didn't let you live, and I couldn't let them walk away like nothing happened. The wind paused, the ground seemed to hum faintly beneath him. Derek tightened his grip one last time, then slowly released. The leash slipped from his hand, landing beside the grave. No longer a symbol of control, but of farewell. A footstep behind him, he turned. It was Jasmine Rowe, the journalist who had stood by him throughout the storm. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude, she said softly. I just thought you should know. The Department of Justice has launched a full investigation into the entire Riverdale Police Department. 2 recent unlawful arrests were reopened thanks to the evidence you provided. Derek nodded slowly, then looked back at Max's grave. Good. The system must answer, not just 2 men. Jasmine stood still for a moment, then placed a bouquet of white daisies beside the stone. For Max, silence stretched between them. There was nothing more to say. There didn't need to be. One life had been lost, but a community had risen. When Jasmine left, Derek remained. The sky dimmed, the last light faded behind the trees. Night fell, but for the first time in months, it wasn't frightening. He closed his eyes, leaning back against the pine tree. There were no more plans, no more visions of Turner or Cooper, no more blood, no more trials, just Max. And the sound of a single breath, like wind. Sleep well, buddy, he whispered. I'll keep living for both of us. A shooting star streaked across the night sky. Fast as a bling, but enough to make Derek look up. And in that moment, he wasn't a soldier, a witness, or a survivor. He was simply a man, saying goodbye to the most loyal friend he'd ever had. The wind stirred again, gentle like one last wag of a tail. Max wasn't just a dog. He was a living symbol of loyalty, unconditional love and courage beyond instinct. His death was not in vain. It ignited a flame of justice in a town long afraid to confront its darkness. Because of Max, the truth came to light. The abusers fell, and a man who had lost everything stood tall again for his friend. Derek would never get Max back. But he held on to what mattered most, memories that couldn't be erased, and a promise that lives like Max's would never again be forgotten in the shadows. The story of Derek and Max isn't just about grief and justice. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest, quietest souls are the ones who make the world finally stop and listen. If you're watching this video, go hug your 4-legged friend, tell them you love them, and live a life worthy of the loyalty they give you every single day. Thank you for watching Animal Tales Daily. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another moving journey. We're here to tell the stories no one dares to tell, and no one will ever forget.